I'm a 38-year-old professional genealogist. It's not as exciting as it sounds. Most of my days are spent digging through digitized census records and old newspaper archives to help people confirm family legends that usually turn out to be false. But I love the puzzle of it, the way you can rebuild a person's entire world from scraps of paper. My younger sister Clara is getting married this fall. Her fiancé, Mark, is 40, successful, and seems to make her happier than I've ever seen her. He's been around for about 3 years, and while he's always been a little private about his past, we just assumed he was a reserved guy. About a month ago, Mark hired me as a surprise for Clara. He said he wanted a beautiful framed family tree of his lineage to display at the wedding reception, a roots thing to show their families officially merging. I was touched, and honestly, pretty excited for the challenge. I took his payment and all the information he had, his parents' names, his birthplace, the usual. The first few days were normal, just tracing his parents and grandparents through public records. But when I tried to go back further on his father's side, I hit a solid brick wall. Everything just stopped. I figured it was a common records gap, maybe an immigrant ancestor whose name was misspelled at entry. I tried a different approach, tracing sideways to his aunts and uncles, looking for any variation of the family name in that region. I spent days on it, feeling more frustrated than anything. Last night, I finally found a breadcrumb, but it wasn't what I expected. It was a local news article from a small town in Oregon, dated 1993. The article detailed the aftermath of a high school graduation party that went horribly wrong, resulting in a fatal accident. I almost closed the tab, thinking it was irrelevant, until I saw the grainy photo accompanying the story. It was a group shot of the teens involved, and my blood ran cold. One of them, a 17-year-old boy, was unmistakably Mark. But the name in the caption wasn't Mark. It was a completely different name, and according to the article, he was the one driving the car. My first thought was that it had to be a mistake, a doppelganger. People can look alike, especially in old blurry newspaper photos. But the longer I stared, the more certain I became. The shape of his eyes, the way his hairline was starting to form even back then, it was him. I felt shaky. I closed my laptop and went to the kitchen to get some water, telling myself I was jumping to conclusions. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Why would he use a different name? Mark wasn't even close to the name in the paper. I went back to my desk, my professional curiosity now completely overshadowed by a sick feeling of dread. I abandoned the family tree project entirely and started a new file, this time using the name from the newspaper. Suddenly, the brick wall didn't just crumble. It ceased to exist. Records popped up everywhere. Birth certificates, school enrollments, old addresses. It was all there, a clear line leading right up to 1993. And then, just like with his Mark identity, it went cold. I switched back to searching for Mark, but this time I cross-referenced the birth date I found for the boy in the article. It was a perfect match. Sometime in his early 20s, long after the accident, he had legally changed his name. He didn't just adopt a nickname, he wiped his original identity clean and became Mark. He had moved across the country, built a whole new life, and met my sister. I felt like I couldn't breathe. This whole time, we've known him as this stable, slightly boring, reliable guy. Now I realized we didn't know him at all. We didn't even know his real name. My mind kept going back to the accident. The article was brief, just a local report, and it mentioned the driver, Mark, was facing potential charges. I had been so focused on the name that I hadn't really absorbed the rest of the story. Now, I had to know exactly what happened that night. It didn't take long. My professional subscriptions get me behind paywalls that stop most people, and his original name was the key. I wasn't just looking at a local news brief anymore. I was reading the full, devastating court coverage. It was exactly what I was afraid of. The night of the accident wasn't just a party. It was his graduation party. He had been drinking, got behind the wheel of his dad's car with 3 of his friends, and tried to take a sharp corner too fast. He lost control and hit an oak tree. He and the 2 passengers in the back seat had survivable injuries, broken bones, concussions. But the front seat passenger, his best friend, was killed instantly. The articles were brutal. They detailed the rescue efforts, the statements from the other teens, the absolute devastation of the victim's family. My Mark, using his real name, was charged with vehicular manslaughter. He was 17, but the DA pushed to have him tried as an adult given the circumstances. He pleaded guilty, and the judge sentenced him to 4 years in a state penitentiary, of which he served just over 2. I had to get up and walk away. I felt physically ill. This was my sister's fiancé, the man we've had barbecues with, the man who helped my dad fix his deck last summer. He had killed someone. I understood why he changed his name. I understood wanting to escape something that horrific. But to lie about it, to not just hide it, but to erase his entire identity and pretend to be someone else, it felt like such a deep, dark deception. I sat there for what felt like an hour, just staring at the screen. I thought, okay, that's it. That's the secret. It's awful, but that's what I found. But my curiosity wouldn't let it go. I looked back at the original article, the one that listed all 4 names: the driver, Mark, the victim, his best friend, and the 2 survivors in the back, a boy and a girl. I idly searched the name of the girl who had been in the back seat, the one who broke her arm and her collarbone. I just wanted to see if she was still in Oregon, but she wasn't. A public records search showed she moved here, to our city, about 6 years ago. And then I saw something else, a business registration. On a gut-wrenching hunch, I opened my sister's wedding website. And there she was. The girl from the back seat of the crash is listed as their wedding florist. My hands were actually shaking. I told myself it had to be a coincidence. The florist's name isn't that unique. But as a professional researcher, I don't really believe in coincidences like this. It took me less than 10 minutes to confirm it. I found the florist's business registration, which was linked to her full legal name. I then ran a search cross-referencing her name with the town in Oregon where the crash happened. I found her high school yearbook photos. It was her, the same woman who had been at Clara's house 2 weeks ago, measuring tables and talking about the merits of eucalyptus versus ivy. I felt like I was going to throw up. This completely changed the context. This wasn't just a man running from a dark past. This was a man whose dark past was present, helping to plan his wedding. My mind was spinning with 1,000 questions. Does she know Mark is the same person? He changed his name, so maybe she has no idea. But what are the odds? What are the odds she'd move to the same city and end up as his florist? Then I remembered. I remembered the conversation clearly. It was a Sunday dinner back in the spring. Clara was stressing about finding a florist she liked. I remembered her saying that Mark had found one. He'd said a guy at his firm had used her for his wedding and raved about her. He had passed the name along to Clara, and she'd loved her portfolio. He didn't just run into her. He found her. He sought her out and brought her into this, into our family, into my sister's life. Why? Why on earth would he do that? And more importantly, why would she agree to it? Was this some kind of shared secret? Was he paying her for her silence? Or was this something even darker? Some kind of twisted penance where he forced himself to have his past staring him in the face? The family tree project on my desk suddenly felt like a cruel joke. He must have known I would hit a wall. Maybe he was counting on it. Maybe he hired me, his future sister-in-law, to see if I was good enough to find the truth, like some kind of test. Or maybe he's just so arrogant he thought it was buried for good. I'd been digging into his father's side, but I hadn't even looked at his mother's. I realized I had another piece of the puzzle I hadn't even touched. I had to get up. I went to the living room and just sat on my couch in the dark, my mind racing. The florist? Emily. She had been at Clara's bridal shower. I had talked to her. She had smiled, seemed perfectly normal, maybe a little quiet, but nice. Now seeing her face in my mind, knowing she was in that car, felt grotesque. How could she stand to be in the same room as him, planning the happiest day of his life, when he was responsible for the worst day of hers? I went back to the computer. I needed to see the whole truth, his mother's side. The information he had given me was father, Robert Collins, and mother, Jane Collins, née Peterson. I had hit the wall on Robert Collins because, I now realized, he was a total fabrication, a name invented to hide his real father, David Miller. But Jane Peterson? I had a hunch. I went back to the Ryan Miller file. I had his birth certificate. Father, David Miller. Mother, Jane. And my breath caught. Her maiden name wasn't Peterson, it was Collins. It all slotted into place with a horrifying, sickening click. He wasn't Ryan Miller, who changed his name to Mark Collins out of thin air. His full given name was Mark Ryan Miller. He had dropped his middle name, the one he clearly went by, and his father's surname, the one tied to the crime. He adopted his mother's maiden name and started using his legal first name. He became Mark Collins. He hadn't just invented an identity, he had surgically removed the Miller part of his life and was presenting the Collins side as his whole story. This is why he hired me. It was the most arrogant, calculated move I could imagine. He wanted me to build his family tree, the Collins family tree. He must have assumed I'd get stuck on his fictional Robert Collins' father, but would have no trouble building a beautiful, legitimate tree for his mother's lineage. He was hiding in plain sight, using me to validate the half-truth he'd built his life on. I felt a cold rage settle over me. This wasn't just a man running from his past. This was a man actively curating it, and he was using my sister as his cover and me as his tool. I started digging into the Collins family. They were real, and they were a bit more prominent in their home state than the Millers. I found an obituary for his mother, Jane Collins Miller. She died 5 years ago. Then I found another one for his father, David Miller. He died just 6 months after the accident, a massive heart attack at age 48. The local paper called it a tragedy, compounded by his son's recent legal troubles. He had no one left from that life. No mother, no father, just the 2 survivors. And he had pulled one of them, Emily, into his wedding. I looked back at the crash report, at the name of the other survivor, the boy in the back seat. Scott Peterson. I felt a sudden, awful certainty. I opened my sister's wedding website again, clicked on the groomsman tab, and I wasn't even surprised when I saw his name. Scott Peterson, best man. I just stared at the screen. I wasn't even shocked anymore, just cold. Scott Peterson, the best man? I've met him at least 4 times. He was at their engagement party, a big loud guy who told a long, rambling story about how he and Mark met at a software conference years ago. A complete fabricated lie. He was the one who slapped Mark on the back and called him the most solid man I know. And he was there. He was in the back seat, watching his best friend die, while his other friend, my sister's fiancé, was drunk at the wheel. This isn't a secret. This is a conspiracy. The 3 of them, the driver and the 2 survivors. They all moved here. They all changed their stories. They all orbited each other, and now they are all standing together to celebrate a wedding. My mind couldn't make sense of it. Is it a trauma bond? Is he paying them? Or is this some twisted shared penance where they all pretend that night never happened, and by pretending together, they can almost make it true? And what about the 4th friend, the one who died? His name was Kevin. Mark, or Ryan as he was his best friend. He killed his best friend, and now he's got his other friend, Scott, standing in as his best man. The title itself makes me sick. It's like he's replacing him. I looked at the folder on my desk for the family tree, the beautiful framed gift. It all felt so grotesque. Mark hadn't just hidden his past. He had curated it, and he'd brought the other surviving cast members along with him. And my sister Clara, she's not just marrying a man with a dark secret. She's marrying into the secret. She's the new, unsuspecting member of their pact. She's been befriending Emily, laughing with Scott, and planning a future with a man whose entire life is built on a foundation of lies and death. I felt a surge of protective rage for my sister. He didn't just lie. He's still lying, actively, every single day. He let Clara befriend these people. He brought them into her life, into our family. He hired me, counting on my professional skills to legitimize the Collins side of his story, while assuming I'd never find the Miller side. It was an act of unbelievable arrogance. I can't go to Clara. Not yet. She's in love. She'll see this as an attack, and him as the victim. He'll just spin another lie, and I'll be the jealous, crazy sister. I need something undeniable. I need to understand the why from the only person who isn't in on it. I've heard from the driver and the survivors. I need to hear from the victim. I have to find Kevin's family. Finding Kevin's family was tragically easy. His name, the victim's name, was all over the court records. A simple public records search showed that his parents, Michael and Sarah, still live in the same house in that small Oregon town. The same house he never came home to. I just sat there for a minute, looking at the Google Street View of their quiet, tidy-looking home. My job involves looking at the dead all day, but this felt different. This wasn't a puzzle. This was a wound. I'm a researcher. I don't cold call grieving parents. So I did what I do best. I kept digging. I found an online memorial page for Kevin. It's one of those sites where people can post digital candles and leave messages. It was still active. Every year on his birthday and on the anniversary of the crash, his family and old friends would write to him. It was devastating to read. Posts from his mother, Sarah, were the most frequent. 21 years gone, Kev. Some days it feels like yesterday. We miss your laugh. My heart ached for this woman. And then, through the memorial page, I found a link to a blog she had kept. It was one of those old free blog hosting sites. She hadn't posted on it in a few years, but the archives were all there. She started it around 2007, about 10 years after the trial. The title of the blog was just, No Justice for Kevin. I started reading, and I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't just a mother's grief. This was a mother's rage. She wrote post after post detailing what she believed really happened that night. The official court narrative was that Mark, Ryan, was the only one who had been seriously drinking and that the others were just passengers. But Sarah didn't believe it. She wrote, and I'm paraphrasing, that she was convinced they were all in on it. She claimed Scott and Emily lied on the stand to protect Mark. She was adamant that they were all drinking, that they had all been partying for hours, and that they concocted the story of Mark being the only one responsible to minimize the charges for everyone. She wrote about how Mark's family had better lawyers, how Scott and Emily's families just wanted it to go away. She was convinced they had all made a pact. She called them the Three Liars. This wasn't a trauma bond. This was a cover-up. They weren't just survivors of his mistake. They were his accomplices. This whole new life Mark built wasn't just to escape his past. It was to seal it, to lock it down with the only two other people who knew the full truth. I scrolled to the very last post on the blog, dated about 18 months ago. It was short, and it was different from the angry investigative posts before it. It just said, "He's trying to buy our silence. After all this time, he sent a lawyer to our house with a check. He thinks he can buy our son's life. He thinks he can buy our forgiveness." 18 months ago. I did the math in my head. That was right around the time Mark and Clara were moving in together. Right when things were getting permanent. He wasn't just hiding his past. He was actively, currently trying to scrub it, to buy the silence of his victims' grieving parents so he could start his new life with my sister, guilt-free. The cold corporate calculation of it, sending a lawyer with a check, made me feel sick. He was treating the death of his best friend like a hostile merger, an old debt to be settled before closing on a new acquisition. And he hired me. The full weight of that hit me. This whole family tree project wasn't just arrogance. It was a failsafe. He gives me the Collins name. I build a beautiful, legitimate tree for his mother's side, and it hangs at the wedding as a testament to his roots. He was using my professional reputation to launder his fake identity. He was making me an accomplice without my knowledge. I was furious, but I knew I still wasn't ready. A grieving mother's blog, however convincing, wasn't hard proof of a cover-up. Clara would see it as the ranting of a broken woman. Mark would play the victim, the tragic young man who made one horrible mistake and is now being haunted by it. I needed something that tied the three of them, Mark, Scott, and Emily, together now. I turned my attention to Emily, the florist, the girl from the back seat. According to Kevin's mother, she was a liar who helped cover up the truth. So why was she here? Why was she taking part in this? I started digging into her business. Emily's Blooms. It's a very successful high-end shop. Clara raved about her. I found her business incorporation documents. They're public record. She founded the LLC 6 years ago, right when she moved to the city. I looked at the initial capitalization paperwork, the documents that list where the startup money came from. It wasn't a bank loan. It was a single large private investment from a holding company. A generic-sounding LLC, Cascade Ventures. I've been a researcher for 15 years. I know how to follow the money. It took me another hour, tracing that LLC back through a series of shell corporations. But I found him. The sole proprietor of Cascade Ventures is Mark Collins. He didn't just find her and recommend her to my sister. He funded her. He paid for her entire business. He moved her here, set her up, and gave her a new life, just like he gave himself one. This isn't a trauma bond. It's a payoff. Scott is his best man, his alibi, and Emily is his pensioner, the one he keeps close and keeps quiet by ensuring her entire livelihood depends on him. I finally understood. He's not just marrying my sister. He's surrounding himself with the only people on Earth who could ever expose him. I felt like I was holding a live grenade. The paperwork for Cascade Ventures was proof. This wasn't a secret. It was a multi-year, multi-state criminal conspiracy to cover up the truth and buy silence. He hadn't just paid off Emily. He had set her up in business as a way to keep her chained to him. And Scott, his best man, was his willing alibi. My sister was walking into a marriage that was, at its very core, a hostage situation. But what do? If I go to Clara, just me, with a stack of legal documents and a crazy story, she won't believe me. She'll be horrified, yes, but Mark is a master manipulator. He's had over 20 years to perfect this story. He'll cry. He'll admit to the accident, paint it as the tragedy that ruined his life, and say he's just been trying to do right by the other survivors, helping them rebuild their lives as his penance. He'll paint me as the cruel, obsessive sister-in-law, digging up a grave to hurt him. And it will be 3 against 1. He, Scott, and Emily will all have their stories straight. Clara will be confused, she'll be heartbroken, and she will choose him. I'll lose my sister. No, I can't just tell her. I have to show her. I have to create a situation where the lies are so big, so obvious, that they collapse on themselves. He hired me to make a family tree, so I'm going to make him one. I spent the next 2 days working obsessively, not on the fake Collins tree, but on a second one. I used the same beautiful template, the same elegant script. But this one was the truth. It started with Ryan Miller, who became Mark Collins. It showed his parents, David and Jane. It showed the date of his father's death, just months after the accident. And then, branching off not as a relative but as a connected line, I added Kevin. His birth, his death, and the names of his parents, Michael and Sarah. I added Scott and Emily, linking them all with a simple, devastating date, June 11th, 1993. I printed out the LLC paperwork. I printed the blog posts from Sarah. I printed the news articles. I put it all in a second, identical portfolio. I called Clara. I told her the family tree was done, and it was spectacular. I told her I wanted to present it to her and Mark, and that my treat, I was ordering a celebratory dinner for all of us at her house this Sunday. She was thrilled. She said it was perfect timing. Scott was in town, and Emily was already scheduled to drop off some centerpiece mock-ups. My blood ran cold, but I kept my voice light. Perfect, I said. The more the merrier. A real pre-wedding celebration. The trap was set. All 3 of them would be there, in one room, comfortable and unsuspecting. But I had one last call to make. I had to know. Did Kevin's parents take the money? I couldn't go in without knowing. My hands were shaking as I dialed the number for Sarah, Kevin's mother. I introduced myself, my voice cracking, and just told her the truth. I'm the sister of the woman Ryan Miller is planning to marry. There was a long, terrible silence. I thought she'd hung up. Finally, she spoke, her voice brittle. We refused the money. We told him and his lawyer to go to hell. A wave of relief washed over me, but she wasn't done. But he didn't stop, she said, her voice breaking with a sudden raw anger. He couldn't buy us, so he went after our daughter, Kevin's little sister. She was only 10 when he died. He found her on social media. He's been sending her money for years. Gifts, trying to buy her forgiveness. I walked into Clara's house that Sunday, my heart hammering so hard I was afraid she could hear it. I was carrying 2 identical leather-bound portfolios. The scene was exactly as I'd pictured, and it made my stomach turn. Clara was glowing, pouring wine. Mark was at the head of the table, looking relaxed and proprietary. And on the couch, laughing together over a magazine, were Scott and Emily. The 3 of them, a perfect picture of friendship. I kept a tight smile on my face. We all sat down for dinner, and the small talk was agonizing. They asked about my work, and I just said it had been very illuminating lately. After we finished eating, Clara clapped her hands and announced it was time for the big reveal. I stood up and unzipped the first portfolio. I presented the Collins family tree to Mark. It was beautiful, all his mother's lineage, legitimate and impressive. He was so pleased. His smile was a mile wide. He called it incredible and said it was the perfect gift to symbolize their new beginning. Scott clapped him on the shoulder, and Emily smiled at him with a look of, well, now I knew it was relief. They thought I had hit the brick wall on his father and just given up. Then I put the second portfolio on the table. "I'm so glad you like it, Mark," I said, my voice steady. "But I actually made a second one. I felt the first one was incomplete." The mood changed instantly. I didn't even have to open it. Mark's smile didn't fade, but it froze. Clara just looked confused. I unzipped the bag. "You see, Mark," I said, looking right at him, "you gave me the wrong father's name, but I found the right one. And once I had his name, I found everything. I found Ryan Miller." Clara let out a confused little laugh. But Mark didn't move. Scott's face went white. I saw Emily's hand, the one holding her wine glass, start to shake. I laid it all out. I didn't yell. I spoke calmly, like I was presenting a case file. I put the first document down, the 1993 news article of the crash, with his picture. "That's Kevin," I said, pointing to the victim. "Your best friend." I turned to Scott and Emily. "And that's you two, in the back seat." Clara stopped breathing. She just stared at the paper. Mark started to speak, to spin. He said it was a horrible tragedy, that he'd been running from it his whole life. He was so good, so convincing. He started to cry, saying he just wanted a fresh start. "Like the fresh start you gave Emily?" I asked. I put down the Cascade Ventures paperwork. "I found the LLC, Mark. I know you paid for her business. Is that your penance? Or is it her silence?" Emily made a small strangled sound. Scott stood up and told me I was out of line. "And Scott," I said, "I guess you're just here as the best man? The alibi? The one who swore Ryan was the only one drinking?" Mark's mask finally broke. He wasn't sad. He was furious. His eyes went cold. He told me I was trying to destroy his life. "You're destroying my sister's," I shot back. "But this," I said, "this is the part Clara needs to hear." I put down the printouts of Sarah's blog. "This is from Kevin's mother, about how she believes you all lied, about how you sent a lawyer to buy her silence 18 months ago." Mark denied it. He said she was a crazy, grieving woman. He was yelling now. "She is," I said, my voice quiet again. "But she also told me you couldn't buy her, so you went after Kevin's little sister. You've been sending a grieving woman's daughter money, gifts, for years. You didn't just hide, Mark. You are actively, right now, trying to buy the silence of the family of the boy you killed." That was it. That was the one thing he couldn't spin. Clara looked at his face, this stranger's face, twisted in rage. She looked at Emily, who was openly sobbing into her hands. She looked at Scott, who was just staring at the floor, silent. The three liars, broken. Clara just stood up, her whole body shaking. She didn't scream. She just looked at Mark and said, "Get out." He tried to protest, to grab her arm. I stepped between them. Scott and Emily were already scrambling, grabbing their coats, and running out the door. Mark looked at me with a hatred so pure it chilled me to the bone. Then he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. I stayed with Clara all night. She didn't cry. She just sat on the floor, surrounded by the pages of my research, reading every single word. Update High Reddit. It's been about 4 months. The wedding is, obviously, very off. It was a complete nightmare for about a week. Mark didn't go quietly. He called. He texted. He showed up at her apartment, alternating between begging for forgiveness and threatening me. My sister, God bless her, called the police and got a restraining order. As for the other two, they're gone. Emily's flower shop is closed. For lease sign in the window. Scott's social media is gone. I guess once the money and the security of the pack disappeared, There was nothing left to keep them here. They just vanished back into the shadows. Clara is with me. She's in therapy. She's a wreck. But she's also the strongest person I know. She's grieving a man who never existed, and she's furious at the man who did. It will take a long time. As for me, I sent my entire file, all of it, to Sarah, Kevin's mother. I don't know if there's anything legally she can do after all this time, but I felt she deserved to have the truth. She deserved to know she wasn't crazy. She wrote me back a simple one-line email. Thank you for seeing our son. I quit my job. I'm taking some time off. I still love puzzles, but I think I'm done digging up graves for a while. I'm just going to be here with my sister.